Hey everyone, my name is Travis. I'm the children's pastor here at Discovery, and I am so glad that you are hanging out with us today as we continue on in our series, Storytellers. You may not even realize it, but the story that you are living right now is a story where God is already moving. And today we're going to hear the story of the Jackson family, a family right here in our community here at Discovery. And we're going to hear about how they adopted their little girl, Ellie. Here's their story.
But God's in the little things. He's not in the great big things all the time. Not everybody can be a pastor or a teacher, but we all have a job to do.
I think it's important for me to make sure that they're taken care of.
Everybody has some sort of talent or gift that they could use, and we're all part of the body of Christ. We can whether it be a finger or a toe or an arm, or it doesn't matter.
I'm Karen Jackson. This is my husband Ryan, and we have been at Discovery since relatively close to the beginning.
Yeah, within the first 6 to 9 months of Discovery opening up, we started to attend.
So coincidentally or not, maybe it's National Adoption Month, and we'll be showing this during that time, but also I just found out that this is the 40-year anniversary of you guys heading over to adopt your little girl, Ellie. So first of all, congratulations, and on behalf of our church family, we are inspired and so thrilled that we get to, cheer you guys on and celebrate what's going on in your family, but also just be a part of Ellie's life and your whole family's life as you go through this journey. And so I just really want to start kind of understanding your story of adoption. Thanks for telling this story for everybody else to kind of hear and know. But what kind of led you to make the decision to pursue adoption and look into it? What was behind that? Where did it start? Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it started when I was a young teenager. I have 2 siblings. I'm the middle child. I have a sister 2 years older and a brother 2 years younger. So we were all in that young teenage period of time, and my parents started to talk to us about the idea of adoption. With that conversation planted a seed in my head, and it's strange. I've felt a longing or a calling for since that period of time on. We actually become the family when we make that sort of decision and introduce someone to our home in in the not natural way that people think of families. So again, at that point, it's just always there as a thought.
That's cool. What about you, for you, Karen?
It wasn't something I always thought about, but Ryan talked about it from early on in our dating relationship, and I never really gave it a second thought, honestly. But then there was a Sunday at Discovery where there was a talk about adoption. I don't remember if there was a organization that came, but I remember banners in the lobby, and that just hit home with me and kind of lit a fire in my heart, and we started talking after that. One thing for me was money, the finances. It's always there, but every time we would hit some sort of a roadblock, God answered the prayer, and I can remember we were leaving 3 days before we left, and we got a call from a grant agency that they were just granting us a sum of money that we could use towards our travel. And so that was one of my biggest concerns going through. And it just, every time we hit it, just worked out.
You hear those horror stories of it's this much, and then it's this much, and then it doesn't go anywhere, and then it's this much,
And finances are real to this process. Again, there's no way to cut it. And when you interview with an agency, they are upfront about it. And if you look at it like there's sticker shock to that. If that's the place in your life that you are most concerned about taking a leap with, it's real. But I think if there are a lot of motivations to get into adoption. Our motivation was to complete our family, and so in any way, with any child that we would ever have for whatever reason, money was never going to be an obstacle, or a block, I should say. It's the obstacle, but it was never going to stop us. And so we had this feeling of someone out there was waiting for us. Would I ever let my last dollar stop me from that? To us, it really opened up what we view family as. Who is your family? We aren't shy with our children about relationships that we have as a family that are not our brother or sister, but that we treat them as if they are our brother or sister. Therefore, for our children, it's their aunt and uncle. It has shown to me that love, and loyalty, is what kind of bonds us. And so, I don't see family as having to be blood, because of her, obviously. But we've extended it past that, and that's what our family is the people that you do rely on, and we're lucky. This isn't to say we don't have the blood family that we do rely on. It's just our family, when we think of it and when our kids think of it, is bigger than that. Again, I think that to heed the advice of that it's not easy, but that hopefully that doesn't become a deterrent, like the first kind of little bump in the road doesn't stop you. Again, if our story means anything, it's that you'll get there. And so that would be my hope for someone who's really interested. With COVID, we still track a lot of people who are doing adoptions, and we're still part of different groups. And we watched people get very late into the process and not be able to travel because of COVID. And my immediate thought is, I'm glad I was 4 years ago. This is temporary as much as we don't think it is. And so I don't know, but I hope people stayed with it. But again, those are milestones, or those are roadblocks that nobody can tell you is going to happen when you start looking at them 18 months ago, right? Yeah. We don't know what COVID is 18, 19 months ago, and that's how long these processes take. And now what if you're up against it, and now you get told you can't travel? It's heartbreaking, but I don't think it ends. But that's easy for me to say because I didn't have to deal with that. But we had our own uncertainty, and so I guess if you just go in with that, with a determined spirit, if you're doing it for the right reasons, if you know that this is God's plan for that child and for you, you won't let something like that get in your way. And again, a pandemic is real, but if it's only a year, then it's a part of your story, that you look back on. We have pieces of our travel that we look back on that are parts of our story, but they're only parts of the story, right? It extends long beyond that. I think the best way that our church can support people out there is again having open dialogue about it and having groups come in, which we talked about the church, that a group came in and got our attention. And since then, at least one more time, we've done this as a church. So I think just again, you don't know where someone's seed is really when we're talking about people's journey. It may not be the right time today, and so if we have this conversation this month and we drop it, then maybe someone doesn't get that kind of kick later. So I think that there's got to be a constant constant kind of highlight to this being a part of what we want to be as a church, that we want to be welcoming to all, that we want to be encouraging families to look whatever they determine their family should look like, and that we offer groups of people who have either gone through it or again can point to agencies that are trusted agencies that can get people organized and get through this process. I think that would be easily the best thing that I think our church could do.
I know one thing for me, we hadn't picked an agency yet, and I went to a party with a certain agency, and just sitting down and talking to these families that had just returned a few months before, it just really helped open my eyes to how this process could really work. And even though there are roadblocks, the end result is worth all of it.
I want to wish all of you a very merry National Adoption Day, of course, which was this past Saturday, November 21st. And a happy National Adoption Month to all of you as well. We were so honored to have the Jacksons tell their story. It takes a lot to open up like that because honestly, their act of adoption felt so natural and normal to them because of how Jesus had prepared them. But because of the decision that they've made to expand their hearts and their homes, they've become some of my heroes and maybe some of yours too now, though they'd never want that label. We all love a good adoption story. They're beautiful, but sometimes for us personally, they feel unattainable. So before we go too much further, I just want to be very clear about today. We absolutely do hope that some of you, after their story, decide to adopt a kid or make a big commitment to care for kids. But their story isn't just about adoption. It's about something much bigger, something we all can do, regardless of our home life, our financial situation, or our readiness to permanently welcome another kid in our lives. They've inspired me to think this simple idea that maybe you will begin to believe as well. Here it goes. I already have more than enough room in my life to cherish a kid that's probably already waiting. Their story reminded me of a cheesy song I grew up singing in church. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Sorry about my singing voice. It goes on to kind of list all kinds of other kids and sort of their races and how important they are to God. And then it proclaims loudly, they are precious in His sight. And so all black children are precious in His sight. All brown children are precious in His sight. All Asian children are precious in His sight. All white children are precious in His sight. All indigenous children are precious in His sight. I love both the specificity and the inclusivity of that song, and at a young age, it taught me a lot. But that list could go on and on and on. Maybe this sounds ridiculous, but I think that song is actually a bit of an understatement. Jesus explained the deep connection between God and kids powerfully in Matthew 18. If you want to turn there in a Bible app or an analog Bible, that's the main focus of Jesus' teaching that we want to look at today. There's also notes in our Discovery app if you want to follow along. Just before this passage, Jesus has been explaining to His followers that He thinks His life is in danger. You know how they respond? His followers, His best friends, begin to ask, well, if you die, who's next in line to be in charge of this little movement we're a part of? Kind of insensitive if you think about it. Their obsession with greatness and political power always seems to kind of annoy Jesus. It probably annoys Him when we similarly get obsessed with that kind of stuff too. So He calls a little kid over to Him. As we see elsewhere, kids loved hanging around Jesus. I don't know if it was His playfulness or His kindness or His encouragement, or just that He uniquely in their world made kids feel both safe and seen. And so undoubtedly, nearby, there were always kids somewhere hanging around. This is my friend and neighbor Ainsley. Say hi to everybody.
Hello.
She's a cool kid. She's insightful and creative, and she asks great questions. She's going to read to us one of Jesus' teachings about kids because I can't think of a better person to do that.
Jesus called a little one to His side and said to them, "Learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become a teachable and learn about the kingdom of heaven with the wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in."
Keep in mind, the Jewish world in which Jesus lived and taught, kids were protected, but not taken very seriously. At other times, His disciples tried to get rid of them, thinking they were just a distraction, but Jesus stopped them and welcomed the kids in. He was like the best possible version of like a mall Santa. Kids were just lining up to get some of His attention. Jesus' respect for kids was incredibly unique, not just within His Jewish culture, but really in all of world history up to this point. He treated them not like the next generation, but as the present generation. Not just as the future of our world, but more importantly, important people for today. Their experiences, opinions, and thoughts matter just as much as any adult. I think he knew what modern marketers now know. Kids are more influential than we realize. That's why they pummel them with Christmas advertisements throughout the season. They know where the real decision-making power is in your household. See, Jesus uniquely took their perspectives seriously. And so he goes on to teach this, and this is really a key point in what he has to say for us today. Ainsley, will you go ahead?
Whoever continually humbles himself to become like this gentle child is the greatest one in the kingdom of heaven. If you welcome this little one on my behalf, you are welcoming me.
You're awesome, Ainsley. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Like I said, in Jesus' Jewish world, kids weren't taken seriously, but in the Roman world that surrounded them, kids were valued even less. There were no legal protections for kids. Abandoning them was not only acceptable, it was common. They were treated like property. They were only kept either because they could contribute to the family business or be a legal heir or be married off to some rich family for cash. Because of this, sons were kept more often than daughters. Of course, many kids were still treated well in the Roman world. The ceiling of care was similar to today, but the floor was exceptionally low. Kids, along with anyone else who were perceived to be weak, were victims of an early form of social Darwinism. Mortality rates for kids were shockingly low, sometimes because of disease, but just as often because of the decisions of their parents. Some kids, if allowed to be born, would be left abandoned along the side of the road or in the town's garbage dump. Maybe that context will help you understand why Jesus gets so intense with what he says next. He says, if you welcome this little one on my behalf, you're welcoming me. But if anyone abuses one of these little ones who believes in me, it would be better for him to have a heavy boulder tied around his neck and be hurled into the deepest sea than to face the punishment he deserves. Wow. Do you see how seriously Jesus takes the treatment of kids? And his early followers actually do a great job of putting his teaching into practice. Let me explain. Within about 2 centuries, a small grassroots following in a forgotten part of the world became so influential that it fully transformed the massive Roman Empire. And today, it continues to be a global and cultural force. Discovery is part of that legacy. So what was their secret to their shocking success? Remember Jesus' words about becoming like a kid and protecting kids? It comes within a conversation about greatness. And that's exactly how their movement grew. They embraced and empowered and protected vulnerable people, like slaves and immigrants and women, the sick, and yes, even kids. It was an upside-down movement. It didn't really grow because of the strong or the powerful members of society, but actually because of the weak. This was especially true with kids. Jesus' followers would vigilantly scan their cities for abandoned kids. It was a regular practice for them to go into garbage dumps and listen for cries for help. They'd sell themselves into slavery so little kids could go free. And for every single one they could help, they'd find a home within their church family who would raise them as their own. Their homes and their families were ever expanding. Then think about what happens there. Kids who had been adopted because of Jesus obviously wanted more than anything to follow this same Jesus. Kids society had rejected. Jesus had chosen to lead his movement. As they lived Jesus' teaching, the early church revolutionized for the entire world a new way of cherishing and raising kids. One scholar even suggests that the idea of childhood, a crucial time for kids to have flexibility, to play, and to grow in maturity, was actually invented by the church. For the record, I also think it's really cool that this meant that the church was raising a forgotten generation of little girls, teaching them to be strong, independent women. The greatness of the church was built on weakness. It was by embracing the vulnerable, just like Jesus, especially kids, that they transformed the world. The biggest movement in world history was tied to a church culture that valued the littlest of lives. I don't know about you, but I want to figure out how to continue that legacy, much like Ryan and Karen and Will and Jameson and Ellie have done. They believed, like the early church, that they already had more than enough room in their lives to cherish a kid that was already waiting. Now let's take our big idea one piece at a time, and maybe I can convince you that it's true. What does Jesus mean by being welcoming to a kid? What does it mean to truly cherish them? I loved hearing how meaningful it was for the Jacksons to have people in our church invest in the life of Ellie. People who rallied around their journey to open their homes. She's talked about Andrew Rigby sending her regular updates during a service, or Kyle Leggett, in their words, becoming the second man in Ellie's life when she was the second man she would go to when after Ryan, the second guy she ever felt safe around. It meant all the difference to them that our church was poised to cherish their daughter. My own story's like that too. Whether it was Miss Melanie or Anna Beth or Pastor John or my parents' small group, they took an interest in me as a kid. They took me seriously, and because they loved me, I trusted them. And I learned that Jesus must be just like them too. See, I was a kid born out of a long season of infertility, and so before I was born, adults around my church were praying for me, and it showed after I was born too, and the way that they treated me. What if what Ellie and I got to experience was even more common, especially at Discovery? Hopefully it already is, but what if we kept challenging ourselves as a church culture and way beyond our gatherings to cherish every single kid we came in contact with? What if our church, like Jesus in the early church, rallied itself around little lives? Not because they're the future, but because they matter right now. What if their presence were precious in our sight too? What if you tried to take a real interest in every one of your kids' friends? You learned their names, you asked them questions about themselves, you made sure they knew your home was a safe place for them, no matter what their home life was like. What if you made it a practice, instead of complaining about the noise or judging the parents of the kids playing around your neighborhood, you saw it as an honor to be a part of their lives, and then you resolved to get to know their family? What if you listened and participated with the kids in your car? Instead of seeing it as a burden to taxi them around, it was kind of an opportunity to make sure they felt known. What if you decided to find a place that specifically helps vulnerable kids, and you gave some of your free time to plant some seeds of heaven in their lives? We can help with that. We'll tell you more about that later. We've said before that the most valuable thing we can give anyone is our attention, and Jesus gave his to kids. How cherished would they feel if you began to intentionally give more of yours to some kid in your life? One of our favorite organizations is Stadia Church Planting. Some of our friends work there, like Janie Mahaffey or Wesley Bolden. They do great work starting new churches all over the world, and it's been an honor for us to support them from time to time and to work with them, especially because one of their stated goals, and I love this, is to keep starting churches until every child has a church. They keep working to make sure there's more room in more churches for kids that really need it. Now, I think many of us naturally have certain reactions when it comes to making more room in our lives for kids through something like adoption or foster care, or even just paying more attention to the kids you already have in your life, even sometimes your own. We say things like, well, my schedule is jam-packed, or the budget is pretty tight, especially with all this economic turmoil, or my home, it just really isn't ready, or maybe the biggest one of them all, I don't know if I have the emotional capacity to care for someone else. I've made all of these excuses for why we haven't had kids or we haven't finished our background check for foster care, but I think Jesus would say something a little bit different. To change your mind, Jesus could point to the fact that the average American house is about 600 square feet, basically a whole another apartment, bigger than our contemporaries in other Western countries. Or he could maybe point to the American median income. It's around 45 to 65,000. It's about 4 to maybe even 7 times as much as the median global income at around 10,000. He might have pointed to our screen time or our streaming time if we bring up our schedules. See, the average American watched 4 hours of TV, and that was before the pandemic. Jesus could point to all kinds of facts about how we already have much more room in our lives than we realize. But I think instead, he'd just point back to that one line. When you welcome a kid, you're welcoming him. See, I think what Jesus is saying, not only is he giving his people a responsibility, but he's also offering to take some responsibility himself. He's saying that if you take the leap to welcome kids into your life, He'll help you find your way through it. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is a prayer that the early church leader Paul passionately prays over the church in a city called Ephesus. They were struggling with racial and cultural divisions. They didn't feel like they had enough space in their lives for people who were different than them. And so he says this as he prays for them. He says, "When I think of all of this, I fall to my knees and I pray to the Father, the creator of everything in heaven and on earth. I pray that from His glorious, unlimited resources, He will empower you with inner strength through His Spirit. Then Christ will make His home in your hearts as you trust in Him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep His love is." Unlimited resources from the creator of the universe, resources for love, of finances, for emotional energy. One of the most important shifts Jesus desperately wants us to make in our perspective is to move away from the mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance. There's already more than enough to go around. He's great at making more room in your life. The Jacksons were very open with us about the sticker shock of adoption. The financial obstacle was extremely intimidating, but somehow they said, at just the right time, a grant would come through or a gift would show up. Things would just keep working out. My friend recently had their 5th boy last month, and they posted about saying, in case you're wondering whether you'll love your 5th as much as your 1st, don't worry, you will. It's like your heart can just keep expanding if you give it the chance. I'm sure Jesus would love to help you continue to make more and more room, expanding both your home and your heart. Lastly, there are kids already waiting. I've been able to get to know some awesome advocates for kids in our church. I've heard the same thing over and over and over again from them. They say there are so many awesome kids that just need someone like you who will pay attention to them. Just need someone who cares, especially teenagers, the one oftentimes forgotten by the system. As of 2018, there are more than 424,000 kids in the U.S. foster care system. By the way, there are about 300,000 churches. I'm not really great at math, but I think that means just 1 or 2 adoptions per church could make a big difference. I think the few hundred of us that are part of our church could easily support a couple ourselves. But adoption isn't always the best option. This issue is way bigger and its solutions are way more every day. You know, in Pennsylvania in 2018, there were 42,252 kids who were involved in some sort of maltreatment dispute in court, but only about 10,000 entered the system. That means 75% of the kids that especially need to be cherished aren't in a program, but they might go to school with your kids. You might see them in your neighborhoods. They might be around you more often than you realize. You don't have to consider being an adoptive or a foster parent to be part of the solution. This is why Jesus wants us all to learn to be poised, to value and cherish every kid, because you never know when you might find one that really needs it. Maybe God has just placed you in the right neighborhood, the right school system, the right social network to be a friend, advocate, or just fun aunt and uncle to some kid you already know. As someone in the social work field told me recently, she said literally taking a kid for a milkshake once a month can make just as much of an impact as taking them in to live with you. Really, it's allowing them to have a safe minute to take a deep breath. So that friend, her name's Brittany Vakiner. She's an attorney that represents kids in the foster care system in Allegheny County. We've been talking with her about some ways that we as a church can serve kids who are waiting in our area. I'll let her explain some options for how maybe you can be involved, but of course, also the collective we, the church, can start to welcome kids into our lives like Jesus might want us to.
Hi, so as Todd said, my name is Brittany Vakiner. I have the privilege of working at an organization called Kids Voice. We represent children that are in the foster care world in Allegheny County. They are either at risk of being removed from their homes or they have already been removed from their homes. I have the privilege of having over 100 clients at any given time, and they find themselves in a variety of different situations. Some of them are in group homes and need people that are going to come in, love them, show them that they still matter. A lot of these kids don't have families. They don't have parents that are around for various reasons. And they just need somebody to show up, to be there, to answer their phone call, and to support them when nobody else seems to care. There are mentor programs through Pittsburgh that I would love to chat about if you would like to get involved with these kids. There are probably our highest need clients in the Pittsburgh area. Beyond that, you have kids that are in the foster care world that are in a pre-adoptive home. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be adopted. That just means that the home that they are in are willing to be their forever home. You can become one of these homes simply by calling a foster care agency, going through the process, and seeing if you become a match for a kid. That's obviously the highest commitment level when you're talking about placement with foster care, but there are other options. There's something called a respite home, which a lot of people don't talk about. Respite homes are a safe place for kids to get away from anywhere for 10 hours to 30 days. These places can take in a child that's just been removed from a home or removed from their parents, and they just until they find a better place or a family member to place them with. These homes can be used when foster parents have to go through medical procedures and don't have somebody else to take care of the child. These homes can just be for these teenage clients that I was talking about when they need a minute to get away, because foster care can be overwhelming when you have never experienced love, when you've never experienced a stable home. Sometimes you just need a break. And so these respite homes are something that we just don't really talk about, but they are so needed in Allegheny County and Butler County, and these kids just need people to believe in them. It really is something that I would encourage you to pray about, to talk to God about, to see if you can be a mentor, to be an adoptive home, to be a respite home, because these kids, there's thousands of them in Allegheny County, and I don't think we realize that. I don't think we talk about that, but it's real and it's in our backyard, and I just encourage you to talk to God about it. Like Todd said, a milkshake can be just as important as giving them a bed to lay in at night. And so if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. I would love to talk about it. Something that Todd and I have spent some time together working on this month is a very simple need. Our kids normally, in the Kids Voice Kids, normally have companies lining up to buy them Christmas presents. We normally have Steelers that get in line and they take them shopping. We have cops that get in line and take them shopping. And this year, because of the state of the world, they don't have that at all. So far, as of November, we only have 100 kids that are going to be served out of the 4,000 that are in our system. So Discovery has taken on, we are going to adopt kids in the Kids Voice system to give them a Christmas. Todd will tell you more about how to reach out to me and reach out to the church to get involved. But I would love for you to stop this holiday season and to really give these kids the Christmas that they deserve, especially when they just might not have the love that we all get to experience this season.
Kids are so important to us here at Discovery, and I'm not just saying that because it's my job. Since day one, we have had amazing leaders find the space they already had in their life and open it up to the kids in our church every weekend. The only thing we've ever truly lacked for our kids is a quality, permanent space for them, but those days are almost behind us. So when you partner with us, you're not only helping support the activities we do each weekend with our kids, but you're helping provide a space where they can come and learn about God and invite their friends to do the same. So whether you've never given before or you're a seasoned giver, I would encourage you and invite you right now to come alongside us as we reach the kids in our community.
See, what I think Brittany is saying is you already have more than enough room in your life to cherish a kid that's already waiting. We've thought through 3 ways you can respond to Jesus' teaching. You can just pick 1 or 2 maybe today. First, we can connect you to a program that serves kids. You can just simply text the word kids to our number, 724-780-0061. Secondly, as Brittany said, we want to help get gifts to about 50 kids that she works with. We'll need them dropped off or mailed in to the building by December 13th. You can hit the link in the chat to join us in this generosity. But one last way to respond. I asked my friend and construction expert Tim Osterwise, funny enough, it's actually Brittany's dad, to come over to my house last week. I showed him all of these little projects I had to do and asked him what it would take to fix this stuff. He left me with a shopping list, and I recently just got the package in. Who knew all you needed to be a homeowner was just a substantial amount of glue? I was talking to one of my friends, Andrea, who's a chemist that works with adhesives, about how these worked. She was telling me when it comes to wood specifically, the glue seeps into all of the fibers, and under the right pressure, it links boards together through a deep connection and actually makes glued wood stronger than it was on its own. That reminded me a lot of the Jacksons. They said one thing they loved about adoption was the way it disrupted history. They changed their genealogy and Ellie's. They used the right binding agent, the right glue to bring her family tree into theirs. Do you know legally adoptions are actually far more permanent than biological families? It's shockingly easy to give up your biological kids. You know, I don't say that to give you any ideas, but it's nearly impossible for a legally adopted kid to be removed from your family. I think Jesus thinks the same way. There's an old saying that blood is thicker than water to talk about family loyalty, but when I look at the Bible, what I actually see is that promise is thicker than blood. Commitment is what truly binds families together. It doesn't matter if you're related to them. Family in God's eyes is so much broader. I mean, that's how God's decided to build his own family. If we go back to Ephesians, Paul describes God's family planning like this. He says that God decided long, long ago to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. God has an ever-expanding home with more than enough room for kids, any kid that's waiting. That includes you and me. No matter how old we are, if you'd like a new family tree, a new last name, a new identity, God is always ready to adopt, and it gives him great pleasure. We'd love to help you find the connection with this Father, and so send us a message. Connect with us in the chat. We're here to welcome you into this family where you will be seen, you will be safe, and you will be cherished. Let's talk soon. Since we're his adopted children, every week he also invites us to his family table to share this kind of symbolic meal. And so as we continue, I just encourage you to grab a little bit of juice or bread or whatever you have around the house. Simple symbols that remind us of our adoption story. A story that starts and ends with our big brother Jesus, his life, his death, and his resurrection.
Salvation, hope of every nation. your majesty. You're the only King who is holy. Let the skies rejoice, let the oceans roar. We will lift our voice, singing holy. Let the whole world sing of your majesty. You're the only King who is holy, holy, holy. You are mighty God, you are mighty God. Angels bow before you.